Excellent. And I will also, so maybe I'll say welcome to the bright side of the wheel of the year, which I am very excited to share with you. And I'll also share my screen. One more share. Come on, you. One moment. There we go. Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, I'm very happy you all are here. I enjoy teaching this material. I've been teaching about the Wheel of the Year for, oh gosh, probably since 2014, 15, so at least 10 years. And I've been practicing the Wheel of the Year for probably close to, let me see, we're in 24. It was probably 1994 when I first started practicing this spiritual practice. And so this is my 30th year of working with this kind of construct. So um, I'm glad you're here. I love to talk about this, so I'm grateful that you're um, going to spend a little time with us. I like to always share with people kind of the shape of our time together, so that you have an idea about how our time's going to go. Um, and so this is what the plan is I'm going to share with you a little bit about my background and then a little bit about Moon Hill Mystery School. We'll create a little sacred space together. We'll discuss the Wheel of the Year, and we will also, I'll give you some recommendations on celebrating the holidays, and then we'll share with you a couple other classes that I have coming up. So that's the shape of things. So that's me. I have been practicing the Wheel of the Year for all around 30 years, probably, which is kind of fun to discover. And I first came to one of the first books that I read was by Laurie Cabot, and she's a very famous witch in Salem. And she wrote a book about Wicca. And in that book, the really compelling thing for me was this idea of the Wheel of the Year. Oh, good, we have another participant arriving. Was this idea of the Wheel of the Year. And so, and particularly for me, I was really attracted to the idea of celebrating something in a seasonal manner that had this kind of circular spiral feel to it. Welcome, Adeline. Is that how you say your name? Adeline?
It is Adeline.
Adeline, welcome. Glad you're here. We're just getting started, so you're great. So the Wheel of the Year was really attractive to me because I really liked that idea of a circular view of the year, because I remember telling stories about when I was younger, like in elementary school, when you're learning about, memorizing the months of the year. I remember them kind of listing the months off as January, February, March, April, and then getting down to December. And I remember as a kid thinking, like, but how do you get from December back up to January? Like, that doesn't make sense to me, this kind of linear description of time and seasons and those types of things. So I really found this like heart connection with the idea of the Wheel of the Year being spiral. So let me see what else is important about me. So I'm a community initiated priestess, which means that I have been called by my community to perform ceremonies, and this started in my early 20s. I started being asked to marry my friends because, as a true Gen Xer, many of my contemporaries were not involved in Christian or church like experiences. And so they were seeking ceremonies that didn't involve the dogma of Christianity. And there was also this sentiment in the early 90s of feeling like we wanted to be married by other people that we loved and that loved us, and particularly people who knew us. And so I started performing wedding ceremonies. Um, and I mostly do that for people that I know, although I have also done that for people that have found me along the way and requested me to perform that ceremony. But I also then started performing or providing mother blessings or baby blessings and baby namings and those kinds of things as my contemporary community began to have children and those kinds of things. And then eventually I got asked to perform or to um, oversee funerals. And so, in this ceremonial way, I provide for my community. Then I also received some shamanic training. So I've always been interested in spirituality, and I was not raised in a Christian household. So um, I did not have a, I don't didn't have that um, dogma very strongly. Um, I wasn't indoctrinated into that dogma, I guess is a way to say that. And so I found shamanism also to be very in aligned with my kind of nature, the way I viewed the world. And so I was trained, I've been in training as um, learning some shamanistic processes. So spiritual technologies, maybe. Um, and so I think that's all that's important about me. I'm a teacher, I'm a psychic medium, I'm a healer. I do body work. Those are a couple other pieces about me. So, and then I had a previous life of owning a metaphysical store, and once we sold that store, then I started Moonhill Mystery School. And Moonhill Mystery School has kind of four pillars of focus, which is eco psychology, which is the idea that um, our nature impacts our mental health, is kind of the short answer to that question. Mysticism is the idea that spiritual technologies like um, um, trance and astral travel and healing and psychic intuition are all accessible to most of us, actually. We just have to learn how to use that tool. Social justice is a big part of Moonhill Mystery School, in that we strive to not culturally appropriate um, other people's practices. It's one of the reasons that I use the word mysticism instead of shamanism. I just don't think that word fits quite right. And then the last piece about Moonhill Mystery School is nature connection practices, which can look like Wheel of the Year. So I have a little bit of a different take. So well, let's talk about the Wheel of the Year. So the Wheel of the Year really was founded in the Wicca tradition, which is a sect of paganism. Um, and my kind of perspective or um, let's see, my kind of flair for the wheel of the year is based in nature. So I have a little stronger focus on the connection to earth and nature, that might be a little bit different than learning um, these practices from a Wiccan practitioner. You might hear different descriptions of the names of the holidays. For instance, I have on the right-hand side Yule being December 21st, and on the slide or the image, it says winter solstice. And so I actually need to update that slide because I decided a little while ago that I was going to use the equinox names and the solstice names instead of the Wiccan tradition names. And so in the Wiccan tradition, the next holiday that's coming up is spring equinox, which is on March 19th, and we'll talk about that. And in the Wiccan tradition, that might be called Ostara. Um, on the opposite side of the wheel, in that same kind of limey greeny color, you'll see autumn equinox, which is on September 22nd. And that is often referred to as Mabon, Mabon. And there's some problems with that. Mabon is an inaccurate name. Um, and part of the naming of this Wheel of the Year, the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, came from Gerald Gardner. And he was a British man, and he was kind of um, pulling on some Celtic or even Irish tradition. And England and Ireland are two different countries, and England, of course, colonized Ireland. And so there are some ways that it might even be considered culturally appropriative to call Mabon um, autumn equinox. So I have refrained from using that terminology. Yule in winter solstice actually comes from the northern countries in Europe, particularly in Norway, Sweden, Denmark. That kind of Nordic region uses the term Yule for the winter solstice. Um, and then summer solstice can be called, you can see it being called Litha, Litha. So, and that is named after a goddess. So, because of my framework, I'm using different words to describe these dates. And I encourage you to do your own research and do what feels good to you. But this is the wheel of the year. So, foundation is in Wicca, based on Gerald Gardner's work, and I've done a lot of research over the years because this is quite an interest for me. And I'm going to share some of my resources with you as well so that you can also make your own choices. So I divide the year into the bright side of the year and the dark side of the year. And the reason that I do that is that the equinoxes are considered the time when we have equal day to night. Now, this is dependent on where you are in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, we actually have a flipped seasonal experience in that when the northern hemisphere is experiencing winter, the southern hemisphere is experiencing summer. So this kind of concept of equal day and equal night is really dependent on how close to the equator you are. So, um, as we are crossing the threshold of the spring equinox, we are increasing our experience of sunlight, and in the Northwest in particular. So I know that not everybody here is from the Northwest, and in fact, if you want to type in the chat where you're from, that would be sweet for me to know. For that information to be shared, if you're comfortable, you can just say what state you're in or what city you're in, however you'd like to do that. But farther south, your experience is going to be less extreme than it is in the Pacific Northwest. So regardless, spring equinox, at the turn of the spring equinox, we start to increase our experience of sunshine. So, my philosophy being that winter solstice is the peak of the most sunshine we'll experience, and summer solstice is the peak of the most sunshine that we'll experience, and winter solstice is the depth of the lack of sunlight. So if we think of those as the two center points, and then the equinoxes is the other center points, we're looking at the bright side of the year and the dark side of the year. So the year that has the least amount of light, and the half of the year that has the most amount of light. So this is how I break up the holidays. You, of course, can do whatever you want. Some people, let's talk about the beginning of this holiday, right? This is a circle. So there is no obvious beginning. This is actually one of the things I love about the Wheel of the Year, in that it really does have no apparent start, which makes so much more sense to me than, again, that kind of a linear perspective of December to January to December. So there are lots of theories or ideas about when this calendar year begins. And spring equinox could be the beginning of the year. This is a great time for you to consider the start of the year. And for many reasons. So we could think of all the babies that are born in the spring, lambs and pigs and deer. Lots of animals are birthing their babies in the spring. It is the time, the spring equinox is celebrated much like Easter. So eggs and bunnies and those little creatures that have had their babies appear during this time of year. So this is like the rebirth of the world, you could think of. So that's a great reason to call spring equinox the start of the year, or the start of the wheel of the year. Another perspective might be an astrological view, and around March, actually 22nd, I think it is. Let me look in my notes here. Um, I don't have this part memorized, but on the around the 20 something of, oh, maybe I have it here, the 20 something of March is when Aries begins, the astrological sign of Aries. And that is the beginning of the astrological chart, or the astrological season begins with Aries. So that's another reason to call this the beginning of the year. So another time of the year that is often considered the beginning of the year is Samhain, which is this holiday that is in purple on the left side of the screen, that is in the end of October and beginning of November. It looks like Samhain, but it's actually a Gaelic word or an Irish word, and it's called Samhain. And many people believe that the beginning of the year begins in Samhain. And I really love this concept too, because when I think of this concept, I think of we are actually conceived in the dark. So in the belly of the mama, the egg and the sperm come together in total darkness. And so at Samhain, we're in the beginning of the dark time of year. So I really like this idea of the beginning of the year being at Samhain. The other idea is that winter solstice is the beginning of the wheel of the year. I am disinclined to feel that way about the wheel of the year, but part of the reason that people think that winter solstice is the beginning of the wheel of the year is because that's when the sun has shown the least amount of daylight in the year, and we flip over to starting to grow more daylight through the year. So it's the darkest night of the year and begins the rebirth of the sun, or the increased sunlight during the day. So some people consider that the dawn of the new year. So those are some of the concepts that some people say um, about the wheel of the year. I don't see that anybody put in the chat where you're from. I don't know if you all don't want to share that, or you can just unmute and say it out loud if you don't mind.
I changed my name, so I put it on my name.
Oh, there we go. I see it, Michael. Thank
Uh,
you. So you're from Lacey, Washington. Wonderful. Fantastic. Oh, Adeline, is that right? Did I say it right this time?
Yeah.
Adeline from Port Angeles. Wonderful. And Susan, do you mind sharing where you're from?
Hi, I'm in Austin, Texas. And so
Fantastic.
I may not be able to stay on the whole class because it's 9:23 here, so that's late for me. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes. That's very late for you. Well, I'm glad that you came on for the parts that you did. And I am recording this, so I'll send out the recording. You can watch the whatever you don't catch
Oh,
by the
great.
end. And this is one of my really rare late classes. Most of my classes, I try to pay close attention because I have a number of students on the East Coast. I even have students in Australia. And so, but I was experimenting with time to see if I would get more students from the Pacific Northwest if I offered a class later in the evening, which is not what happened. So I probably won't be offering late classes anymore, Susan. I'll have to look and see what time the dark side of the year class is, because I'll be offering that class in September, right before autumn equinox. We'll do the second half of the year. So today we're only going to talk about 4 of the 8 holidays. We're going to talk about the next 4 holidays, which what I consider the bright half of the year. So as you see on the column on the right hand side, Imbolc is, well, let's talk about this for a moment. So the 2 blue segments, Imbolc and Lammas, are both holidays that are fixed. And so they are always around the 1st of February or the end of January, and always around the end of July or beginning of August. And then the other 2 holidays across the wheel of the year, Beltane and Samhain, those are also always on April 30th, May 1st, and October 31st and November 1st. So Beltane and Samhain are fixed holidays. Imbolc and Lammas are fixed holidays. And then the 2 equinoxes and the solstices are determined by the stars. So there is a planetary alignment that is viewed to determine what date those are at. Because this is a sun, they're based on the sun actually, to know when the sun is at equal measure, or when the sun is at its most bright or most dim. Okay, so let's see what we have next. So what makes a day special? How do we celebrate? So we really love to think about this in general. Again, I am coming at this from not a Wiccan perspective, or not necessarily a even potentially pagan perspective, really from a nature centered perspective, although you could incorporate a pagan there are pagan aspects to what I'm going to share with you. So I like to examine or to consider, what is the energy of the season? So as you can imagine, at winter solstice, we have the energy of rest, of restoration, of quiet, of introspection. And at solstice, or summer solstice, we have the expression of extrovert, of being out in the world, being expressive and dancing, moving, expressing energy, as opposed to the restoration of the winter solstice. So all of the holidays have their own kind of flavor. And so I think it's good to consider that when you're thinking about how will you celebrate, how will you incorporate this kind of practice into your own spiritual practice. So I like to also recommend, like I love to have an altar, and this photograph here is an example of an altar. So again, this is not a Wiccan altar. A Wiccan altar might have, specific elements like an asame and a chalice and a candle and water and salt and all these specifically spiritually kind of prescribed elements. And so my perspective about an altar is more loosey goosey. So I like to have things that often represent the four elements because I am deeply connected to the four elements. So I often have something that represents fire. I often have something that represents fire, something that represents water, something that represents earth, and something that represents air on my altar for me personally. But that is probably as far as it goes from a specificity perspective. Another thing that is commonly done around this turn of the year is to clear space. And so coming up on spring equinox, we already secularly talk about spring cleaning, right? It's really common for people to say, oh, I'm spring cleaning, I'm clearing out the dust and debris of the winter, and I'm making space for the new, right? I'm letting go of the old stuff. I'm bringing in new stuff. Food is another way that we celebrate holidays, and even our secular holidays that are not religiously affiliated, like 4th of July, for instance. I think most people would commonly say that hot dogs and hamburgers are pretty common on the 4th of July, that if you went to a 4th of July party, that you would expect to probably find something barbecued. And I don't know if that's the same for you, Susan, in Texas, or if there's some other kind of traditional food that you might find. I don't know if people serve chili on 4th of July or what might be different. And you're welcome to share if you want to chime in. And you don't have to either if you want. So.
Definitely it'd be barbecue here, 4th of July. I'm primarily a vegetarian, so but that's still the traditional holiday is
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So my point about that is that there is food associated with it, right? There's a way that, and food helps us, body, mind, and spirit, know that something special is happening. Because when you do something like barbecue, that's hours and hours and hours of time. And it's often an expensive cut of meat, right? Or a big chunk of meat, which costs more money. Like maybe the price per pound isn't so big, but it's a big chunk of meat, right? That gets barbecued. So it takes time and energy and effort. And so as you're considering what you might incorporate into a wheel of the year practice, you might consider incorporating a special menu. And so that might, and it might not be that you serve the same thing for every spring equinox, but what it might mean is that you serve a protein, a vegetable, a salad, a bread, and a dessert, and a starch. So it might be that you serve like a larger offering of food for that gathering than maybe your normal meal. So, like for me, in my family of three, we often do one bowl dishes, like we'll put the rice and the protein and the vegetables, maybe, and sometimes even the salad all into one bowl and eat out of that rather than having this, multiple dishes or everything gets cooked together in one, like a casserole or something like that. And so by creating this larger menu of offerings, it can also help lend to that feeling of it being special. And maybe you invite people over as well. Like maybe if you're a single person, maybe you have a potluck or you bring people together that you enjoy and friends of yours or extended family or something like that. You can also create a ritual for these events. From the Wiccan tradition, there would be a ritual involved. There's lots of books on that. We won't go into a lot of details about ritual. We'll focus on the things that are the asterisks. So we'll talk about altars, food, and crafts a little bit more than the other things. Divination might be something that you do. So you might be pulling a tarot card or an oracle card or runes to divine what's happening in the next season for you. That's another way to kind of mark this turn of the season or make this moment special. Sometimes people do crafts, and so they might do a craft project that again represents the season. So, for instance, trying to think of another holiday that we're not going to talk about. On winter solstice, maybe you take popcorn and cranberries and thread them onto a needle and thread for a garland around the solstice tree, or if you want to call it Christmas tree, you can call it that too. But there might be a celebration, a craft project that is in alignment with the seasonal craft. One of the things you can do with that popcorn cranberry string is you can also put it outside once you're done using it indoors, and then the birds and the squirrels or whatever in your area get to enjoy a little treat. The other thing to consider for holidays is um, the astrological associations. So, as you're considering which holiday you want to work with, you might consider what's the astrological events that are around that. Sometimes there's no astrological event. Um, Sometimes people take in the astrological aspect of the what's happening around the year. I have it listed in this workshop tonight, what the astrological events are around the next 4 holidays. And 3 of them have astrological events associated with them, and 1 of them does not. And so you might consider that when we're looking at the holiday, because the the other thing that I'll say is that I encourage you to think about um, not letting perfection get in the way of the good. And so sometimes people will get themselves worked up about having a celebration on the smack dab of the holiday, like making sure that it happens on February 1st, for instance. And maybe February 1st is a busy night for your family and nobody's home, or there's sporting events, or there's other commitments that are happening that don't allow you to celebrate on that particular day. But I like to really encourage people to celebrate no matter what. If you're a week off, a week before, or a week after, still do it, because the act of creating a celebration is the most important thing. And as you grow your practice, you might find that there's some way in which you create your own practice that really nourishes your lifestyle. So for me, the astrological associations take a high priority because of the magical practices that I'm doing around these holidays. All right, so let's just take a pause for a moment, and I want to check in and see if anybody has any questions so far. Are we doing okay? So do you all know about in Zoom that there are these things called gestures where you can uh, you can raise your hand, or you can give a thumbs up, or something along those lines? Yes, excellent, excellent. Adeline is showing me the thumbs up signal. So that's fantastic. So you're welcome to use these gestures if you know where they are. They're at the bottom of your screen. There's a little button that says um, gestures where you can raise your hand, and you can also give thumbs up and things like that. So if you'd like to use those, you're welcome to. If you don't want to use those, that's fine too. No problem. It does help me when I ask a question like, does anybody have any questions? And someone raises their hand, that's helpful. Or if I'm like, is everybody good? Do you not need a question? Oh, perfect. Fantastic, Michael. Um, then that helps me just know that I'm not missing anything or anyone. So here's a list of some of my favorite resources. And I had mentioned before, Laurie Cabot was one of the first authors that I read about the Wheel of the Year. It was actually a Wiccan book, but it had the Wheel of the Year in it, and that really caught my attention. My next favorite book is called Circle Round by Starhawk, and Starhawk is a really well-known pagan author, and her book Circle Round, which is in the center of the screen now, I really love. It's called, the subtitle is Raising Children in the Goddess Tradition, and so that really is. I'm a feminist. I'm definitely interested in non-patriarchal kind of frameworks and those types of things. So I really love the information circle round. It it says raising children in the goddess tradition, but honestly, I use it with adults all the time. And one of the things I love about the Circle Round book is that it often associates a mythological story with the season, which I think is really juicy and lovely to read a story that is mythically based around um, the kind of concept of the holiday. She also has recipes for food to make, recommendations for foods to make that can help, again, create the specialness. And then she also has a number of craft projects, which I think is really fun because that really helps me feel like I'm engaging. Um, Jane Meredith is another author. I can't remember the title of her book. I think it might be Rituals of the Year. Joanna Colbert Powell, she has, I actually studied with her for a year. She did a really lovely Wheel of the Year. I don't think she's offering it anymore, but it was, oh gosh, 10 plus years ago, where she was, she offered an email um, every season, or a series of emails for the seasons. And so I really like to learn from her. Jason Mankey wrote The Witch's Wheel of the Year, which is the book in the bottom center, which is also really great. I like Jason Mankey. He is also a blogger. There's a lot of blog posts that he has about the Wheel of the Year. And he goes into some of the history and the perspective from different cultures, like some Roman holidays that influence our modern day holidays. Our modern holidays, even like Christmas, were influenced by some of those. Ronald Hutton wrote The Stations of the Sun, a history of the ritual year in Britain, which is really lovely because that book is very academically focused and it has a ton of additional holidays. So the Ronald Hutton book is not just 8 holidays. In fact, it has maybe even hundreds of holidays, which is really fascinating and super interesting to me. And then Mari Kennedy is the most recent person that I studied with, and she offers a year-long Wheel of the Year course that's online, that is a monthly meeting, which is, I was really curious to see her style and framework because I've offered something similar. Have offered in the past something called Weaving Spirit and Magic Through the Seasons, which is a year-long Wheel of the Year course where we go through each holiday together and do some ritual and do some talking about how to celebrate, and then also kind of come back and share with each other about what we were actually able to do and how it went and what we might do the next time around. So those are some of my favorite resources. Whoops, come back here. So this year, the spring equinox is on March 19th. And I also mentioned here that the full moon, and we have a full moon and a lunar eclipse in Libra on March 25th. So I would consider that this whole chunk of time, like the week before, we see what day of the year or what day of the week. So the 19th is on a Tuesday. I would say probably the 17th, that Sunday, through the 26th. So that like 10-day period is kind of what I would consider the spring equinox. And if you had some special event that you, or special experience that you maybe wanted to plan, that would be a really amazing time period to do that. Like I'm actually doing a ceremony with a group of folks on March 25th, which I'm really excited to experience, which will be really lovely. So this is when this holiday is, but really, expand your thinking. If it's more convenient for you to celebrate this on March 17th, it's just 2 days before. So feel free to do that rather than not celebrate at all, is kind of my point. So at any point during this time that we have together, if you have any questions, you're welcome to drop them into the chat or ask them there if that works better for you than waiting for me to ask a question. So I love to hear from you all. I love to hear your questions. I love to hear your experiences. So feel free to add in your 2 cents. So the altar suggestions for spring equinox would be using the color of lavender, light blue, or green. In this altar that I'm showing here, I actually have a kind of pink cloth that I'm using. The energy of this season is joy, happiness, gratitude, and excitement. It kind of also feels a little bit like relief to me as well, because we're starting to see the trees bud, the tulips come up. You see on the right-hand side of this altar, I have a pot of paper white. Those aren't tulips. What are those? Daffodils, paper white daffodils they haven't budded out yet, but they're, on the way to budding out. And so to me, this time of year feels a little bit of like relief. I have the sense of relief of like, okay, we're gonna make it through winter. Winter is not gonna last forever, is kind of how this season feels to me. The crystals that you might incorporate would be clear quartz, rose quartz, lapis lazuli, amazonite, and garnet. The way you might use those crystals is you might put them on an altar, you might carry them on your body, you might bring them closer to you, like if you have a collection of crystals that maybe live on a shelf someplace, you might pull that amethyst from wherever it normally lives and bring it closer to your body, so you might put it on the shelf next to your desk, or you might put it next to your bedstand or something like that. The herbs that would be great to work during this time of year are lavender, thyme, lilac, lemon balm, rose hips, and sunflower seeds. So these all kind of represent that, like, the rebirth of spring, they're also like the lemon balm is both a nervine and an antiviral. So it's great during this time of year, maybe drinking something that's calming. Rose hips has a high level of vitamin C in it. Thyme is also an antiviral. We can be a little more vulnerable in the springtime to colds and things like that, especially when we have any kinds of allergies. And then any plants like paper whites, I mentioned hyacinths and tulips. Those are all kind of some of the first plants in the Pacific Northwest that are starting to poke their heads through. And I don't know if this is your experience in Texas, Susan, but in all the grocery stores, we can find potted hyacinths and potted tulips and cut tulips. And we also have a lot of tulip farms in the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, Michael.
Well, we're going to use shamrocks.
Oh, fantastic. That's lovely. I love that. What a great idea.
St. Patrick's
That's
Day.
wonderful.
St. Patrick's Day on the 17th.
Yeah.
And then there's well, it's also symbol for Awen.
Yes, definitely. I love that. Wonderful. That's a fantastic use. Have you done research on St. Patrick and his association with pagans?
Yes, I have. I read a really good book about St. Patrick.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Yeah, that's helpful. Wonderful. All right. So those are some altar suggestions, and I love to use altars in all parts of my life. This is just, and it can look just like what it looks like on this image. This is a sideboard next to my dining room table. And so I change it out. Sometimes the altar is smaller, it doesn't take up as much space. Sometimes it's bigger. Sometimes it's bigger around the days of the holidays. Sometimes it stays up for 6 weeks because there's 6 weeks in between each holiday. And also, some people put up their altar in the middle of the season. So they might put their altar up 3 weeks after the last holiday. So that might be something that you might notice someone else do, is when they put up an altar. They might put up an altar just on the day of, like they might put their spring equinox altar up on spring equinox. I tend to do it in advance. So I do it, and I often time it with the moon. The moon is one of my allies. So I use the measurement of the moon to decide when I'm going to change things. So if there's a new moon before spring equinox, which we just have, let's see. Yeah, we just had a new moon on Sunday. So I would be putting up my altar right about now, which I actually put my altar up last week because we had a really busy family gathering weekend. So some of the things that you might do for this holiday is dyeing eggs. So it happens around the same time as Easter. Ostara is the Wiccan name for this holiday. And so dyeing eggs is really, oh, okay, Susan's gonna head out. No problem. Doing an egg hunt, just like, many of the same aspects of, or same celebrations of Easter could be adopted into a spring equinox holiday. Easter moves within a quite wide range. Easter can be 2 weeks before or after spring equinox. And so it is, but it's also Easter items are commonly available around spring equinox. So, especially if you have kids, this is a great celebration to be dyeing eggs or going on an egg hunt, or collecting eggshells and putting soil and seeds into them to start your seeds for the season. That's a great way. The eggshells then can be kind of crushed a little bit and planted directly into the soil, and then they offer a little calcium to the seedlings. Making egg rattles is another craft idea. Starting seedlings is a great thing to do in the Pacific Northwest. And if you're in a different environment, this might not be the best time for you to start seeds, but in the Pacific Northwest, spring equinox, we can start seeds inside at least. And you might spend time clearing your garden space and preparing for plantings. Again, that's a really common activity around spring equinox in the Pacific Northwest area. We're supposed to have extraordinarily beautiful weather this weekend. So I will be likely doing some of that garden prep work this weekend, because it's supposed to be in the 70s, which is quite, or upper 60s, low 70s, which is quite warm for us this time of year. So these are some of the celebrations that you can do. Oh, I'm going to go back one more. So some of the things that I like to do, I just wanted to mention some of the food ideas that I had for you. And one of the things I love to do for spring equinox when I'm serving food is to offer, it's again, in your community, this might be called something different, but for those of us that are in the Pacific Northwest, we can find a juice that is called the green drink. And there's several companies that make it, and it's got some green vegetables actually in it, but it tastes very sweet. And so it has usually like an apple base in it, but it's a green colored drink. And you can usually find it in the refrigerator section of your grocery store. But I really love to serve that green drink in wine glasses, because again, this is one of those ways in which, well, first of all, then we're ingesting the green of spring, right? You're bringing it into your body. So it can be kind of ritually ingesting the spring or becoming part of spring. The And I like to serve it in wine glasses because, again, it makes it special. You don't normally drink out of wine glasses in my household. I have a child, and so wine glasses are just not really commonly seen on our dining room table. That might be really common for you, and that might not be special. And maybe there's some other shape of glass that would be special for you, or some way in which I like the wine glass because you can see that the drink is green, and it has kind of a spectacular imagery to it. So that's one of the things I really love to do. So I often will make fresh herb dressing as well. So like I will chop up some basil, cilantro, maybe some thyme, add that to a vinegar and some olive oil, maybe some garlic, and make kind of a fresh herb salad dressing, which is really yummy. That's another way to kind of celebrate the budding out of plants that are coming up. Depending on your area, you might be able to collect some dandelion leaves. So the first dandelion leaves of the season are often not bitter like they are later in the year. And so harvesting some of those fresh plants, even nettles, we have nettles coming up, is another great food, wild food to eat. I really love to eat wild foods because I feel like it helps me reconnect to my own inner wildness. So those are some of the food options. I always like to consider a vegetarian option. If we can reduce some of the meat that we eat, that's better for the environment. I'm not a vegan myself, but I do use much less meat than I have at different points in my life. And so offering something for spring equinox might be really lovely, like a lentils and rice and a salad or something with some fresh baked bread or something like that might be a lovely menu for um, a dinner. And if you have some other thing that you love to do, like if you love to make steaks or whatever, I encourage you to do that as well. Something special, something different is a great way to celebrate. So the next holiday on the wheel of the year is Beltane, which is typically celebrated on April 30th or May 1st. This imagery comes from actually an event that I was able to attend. I didn't attend this particular year, but I was able to attend a holiday, the Beltane in Ireland, a couple years ago. And I got to go to the hill of Equinox and celebrate with 5,000 people. It was just phenomenal experience. So some of the altar suggestions for Beltane would be using the colors green, rose, and pink again, kind of thinking of that like, newly budded out, like I have a rose bush. I don't personally have a rose bush. My neighbor has a rose bush that is actually called dogwood rose or dog rose. And when those buds come on, they're white. And then as the flower begins to bloom, they become pink. And then once the flower is in full bloom, it's a darker pink. And so I think of those kind of light pink, pale pastel colors for Beltane. The energy of Beltane is romance, lust, joy, and pleasure from kind of a pagan or even a nature-centered perspective. Sex is not something to be shy about or that is unappreciated. Sex is a part of our human nature. It's a part of our animal nature, and and in many pagan circles, it's very celebrated and encouraged and very welcome, as opposed to more puritanical Abrahamic religions that want to restrict sexual expression. And so Beltane is like the holiday of the lovers. I also think of Beltane as the holiday of the descendants. So on the opposite end of the wheel of the year, we have Samhain. So Samhain and Beltane are in opposition to one another, and they hold magic for one another. And the Samhain part of the year is the ancestors' moment in time. And so I think of Beltane as the descendants' moment in time. And so there's great stories about Beltane that are, there's stories about people driving their animals over bonfires. Beltane, Lammas, Samhain, and Imbolc are all considered fire holidays. So they're all associated with fire in some way. And so Beltane, we see bonfires being built and people jumping over the bonfire together, or you might jump over the bonfire as a representation of your coupling, like you might be dating, so to speak, if you jump over the bonfire together. Some crystals you might use during this time would be malachite, garnet, rose quartz, tourmaline, copper, and emerald. Many of those stones are green, which are associated with your heart. So garnet, of course, is red, and that is associated also with your heart. Yeah, Michael, did you have a question?
how do you determine, what does Beltane represent? How do you determine the date?
Oh, Beltane is a fixed holiday. So it is always May 1st.
Well, what does it
Was that your
represent?
question?
No, what does it
Oh,
represent?
what is Yeah, so the Beltane is often considered the union between the feminine and the masculine. So that's where the kind of romance, lust, and pleasure comes into mind, is when we think of the union between the feminine and the masculine. So of course we also think of, people as being not just feminine or masculine, but having both aspects within you. But this is that divine union of the feminine and masculine.
Oh, okay. Well, that's like the sacred marriage.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the sacred union, there's actually a story about the sacred union um, that is part of the Beltane pantheon, so to speak.
Right.
So yeah, thanks for asking that. This is one of the reasons why I think of Beltane as the descendants, because it's when the divine masculine and feminine come together and then create another being. So I think of this holiday as being like the descendants holiday, like the children, not the children's holiday, but it's the holiday where we honor the descendants. Like in Samhain, we honor the ancestors.
In shamanic
So that,
astrology, the
uh-huh.
sacred energy has to do with owning your inner uh, opposite gender. So
Oh, nice.
instead of projecting, like if you're a woman, instead of projecting your Mars onto somebody, a man outside you of yourself, you own it as your inner masculine. So the sacred
Mm,
marriage
that's
is like
beautiful.
between your inner feminine and inner masculine. It's a owning your
Oh, that's beautiful.
both genders. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. That'd be great to incorporate into a Beltane
Yeah.
event. I know you're working on some events in your community. That would be phenomenal for a Beltane event
Oh,
to work with that aspect of shamanic astrology.
yeah. Thank you for that. So, Jen,
What a cool ritual that could be.
right.
Yeah,
Well, I always like
awesome.
to include a meditation.
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
with the
Yeah,
equinox, the meditation is um, based on the ritual of planting a seed, and so it's what new what new things do you want to seed in your life?
yeah. I love that.
Mhm.
That's beautiful. That's really lovely. So the herbs that you might work with for Beltane are nettles, mint, rosemary, and rose. So nettles and mint are really popping at this time of year. The mint is one of the first plants to come through. Nettles is related to mint. And nettles is great for allergies, actually, really fantastic. It's also a very nourishing plant. It has a ton um, of mineral content. It's really super nourishing. Nettles are a great wild food. Um, and rosemary and rose, again, we get the first buds or the first new flowers of rosemary that can be very tender. And then often rose bushes are blooming. So I often can collect rose buds around Beltane, and then I might use them in a magical way, or I might create medicine from them, or I might create an elixir. The other thing that I would do too is I would use, so in kind of a food way, what I have done before is I would make like really yummy fudgy brownies and then use rose essential oil in a buttercream frosting. So you get the scent of rose as you're eating that luscious chocolate brownie. Um, the other thing is that you could make an elixir. I found a couple times I found them at outlet stores, so I'm not sure how readily available they are, but I've even found rose flavored waters or sparkling drinks, and I'll use those as part of a ritual too, which can be really fun because we don't drink things that are rose flavored very often. So again, that's a way to make this time special by adding in things. I would, of course, again, serve that with wine glasses, um, so that you see the pink bubbly, liquid in the glasses. Or you could make a nettle tea as well. Nettle tea is dark, dark. It's almost black. Um, when you make nettle tea. So that also has a really striking visual experience. So I'm a very visual person, so I like to add that into when I'm preparing food or making like post-ritual food. I often feed people a little something to eat after a ritual to help ground their bodies. So that's another way to incorporate those things into an event that you might be offering. So some crafts that you might do for Beltane. I love, again, the like paper heart chain. This has a little bit of a Valentine's Day feel to me, this holiday. It has that like expressing love, um, you know, expressing desire to connect, those kinds of things. I often make heart-shaped cookies that I share with my beloveds during this time. Maypole dancing was really common when I was a kid. We used to maypole dance in my elementary school, which I think is really funny now because it's a spiritual holiday. So I think it's really funny that I used to do that in my elementary school. My family personally has a practice of doing random acts of kindness, and in particular, the secret plant delivery. So when I was a kid, and I've also done this with my child as well, is that we would go to the nursery and choose some small plants, and then write a note to someone. That sometimes our notes would be, "We're thinking of you." Sometimes our notes would be a little bit more like, again, kind of like the Valentine's Day thing where it says, something like, "You are special," or "You are important to me," or something like that. We'd put little notes inside the plants, and then we would leave them on our neighbors' doorsteps and ring the doorbell and run, and they'd open the door to a little plant offering on their doorstep. So, and then the other thing that I love to recommend for people to do is to create a self-love body oil. And so that can be just using your favorite essential oils and some kind of oil for your body. That might be, you can use something as simple as olive oil. You could also get specialty oils like avocado oil or almond oil, those kinds of things. But to create a self-love body oil that then you use in a ritualistic manner of applying it to your body daily or after a shower or something, and kind of repeating affirmations. I love myself. I care for myself. I am important. I am loved. Whatever those things are, when you apply this moisturizer, really is what it ends up being. But that's also could be part of an event that you create. If you were inviting, maybe you have a Beltane dinner with your favorite people, when you offer a craft project of making a self-love oil, and everybody gets to kind of alchemy their own, put in their own essential oils to their favorite flavor concoction, so that they have, and then when you smell it, because then you smell it all day too. So like when your body warms up, the scent that you've put on your body kind of wafts up into you. So later on in the day, long after you've maybe forgotten that you put this on, you might catch a scent of that beautiful, whatever scent it was that caught your attention. And then you will remember, oh, that's right. I gave myself this beautiful gift of applying this oil lovingly to my body with these affirmations of joy and happiness. So that's another project you could do. So the next holiday that we'll talk about is the winter solstice, which is on June 20th. And on June 21st, we have a full moon in Capricorn. So again, I would kind of weigh that, you know, when I do my full moon celebrations, I often do it the day before the full moon because my intention is to be riding the crest of the peak. I don't want my full moon celebration to be after the peak of the full moon. So I want to be as close to the peak of the full moon as I can be. So summer solstice is a beautiful time to do a full moon ritual or celebration or practice of some sort. The full moon being in Capricorn is a little bit about body, you know, a little bit about your corporeal being. And Michael is an astrologer, so he could even maybe tell us a little bit more about Capricorn. But I think of Capricorn as this very earthy, you know, aspects to of our nature. And so I would be doing things that are body focused in the winter solstice. Winter solstice is also a really great time to have a potluck. So it's a great time to gather your beloveds. So, as far as a food celebration, I highly recommend having a potluck. And my partner and I have done this many times over the years. And I have to tell you, it's so great to get all those people together that I'm always wishing that I had more time to see and spend time with. But with our busy lives, we just don't ever get around to kind of connecting. And so to be able to invite all my favorite people over and introduce each other, you know, introduce different people from different parts of my life together. It's a really fun thing to do a summer solstice potluck. So I highly recommend that. I love offering a summer solstice potluck. So as you can imagine, the colors for this holiday would be yellow, warm, and gold colors. Anything in that like sunshiny kind of range, orange, you know, any of those kinds of colors. The energy is enchantment, connection, and the fairy world. It's often said that the fairies come out on summer solstice, and at dawn or dusk, you can see the fairies. So it has a very kind of enchanting, I also think of it as like the most extroverted time of the year. So if we think of the equinox as being a more balanced extrovert introvert, you know, or summer solstice is really like the most extroverted. The sun is most present. The sun is out in the world the most. And that warmth and generosity and loving nature that sun has is all what hopefully we're reflecting also to the world. The crystals you might work with are ruby, clear quartz, citrine, amber, yellow topaz, gold, and silver. And the herbs being, thyme, bay. Oh, you know, I can't quite see it because my screen is bigger than my image, but I'm sure you can see the other sunflower, I think is one. But those are some of the herbs that you could work with during this time. Really, you know, June 21st in the Pacific Northwest, our gardens are just kind of getting going. We're probably still in the flower stage of many things, and maybe we do have some yellow squash or summer squash is starting to grow, but they would be probably fairly small still, depending on, you know, how the spring has gone and how the summer begins. But we don't really have a ton to harvest at this point. It's more, everything is more in the flower stage. Um, and there's a ton of flowers that you can eat too. You can deep fry, or maybe not deep, but fry squash flowers in a little bit of breading. You can eat chive flowers, nasturtiums. There's lots of flowers that are edible, and I love to include those into a solstice a summer solstice event. So some of my favorite crafts for this time of year would be flower wreaths, drying herbs for the apothecary, making green crowns with wildflowers, creating dream pillows. Maybe for the Pacific Northwest, lavender isn't quite ready to harvest at summer solstice. I think it's more of a lamas harvest, a little later in the summer. I like to wait until the lavender um, kind of has been on the stalk for a while before I harvest it, just because I like to let the bees do all of their magic um, and harvest whatever the bees need before I take the lavender stalks. Creating lavender wands, making smoke cleansing sticks like I have shown here. I really like to do lavender smoke cleansing wands, and partly because I think that white sage is being over harvested. So having some other plant material that can be burned in a ceremonial fashion, I think is really wise. I really like to leave white sage for the um, indigenous people of the area. And truly, people across cultures and around the world use smoke cleansing as a ceremonial act. And so there's lots of other plants besides white sage that are equally powerful and profound. And there's plants that really like to be harvested. Like lavender, for instance, really likes to have its stems cut. It really helps the plant fill out and become more full and healthier, honestly. For years, I didn't cut my lavender stems because I was wanting them to get bigger and more full, and they became more lanky and leggy and not as full and bushy as we like to see lavender. And I have a good friend who is growing her lavender, and she said, "Oh, yeah, you've got to cut those lavender stems." So now I harvest her lavender stems as well as my own. And rosemary, too. Rosemary likes to be cut back. It can get very large as a plant, and it doesn't mind having its ends trimmed. So I often harvest rosemary, lavender, and then mugwort is another very magical plant. And mugwort is a perennial, very herby plant, and it grows like 10 feet tall in my garden, maybe 8 feet tall in my garden. And in fact, it gets so tall that it falls over. And so when it falls over, I harvest that and turn that into smoke cleansing wands as well. Mugwort has a long history of being associated with trance and dream work and transformational work. So mugwort is great for smoke cleansing. So the last holiday we have is Lammas, which is on August 1st or July 31st. There is a new moon on August 4th. So I like to consider that, again. So Lammas is considered the first of 3 harvests. So Lammas, fall equinox, and Samhain are our harvest holidays. And so, again, in the Pacific Northwest, traditionally you would harvest a grain at Lammas. Lammas is kind of the grain holiday. So you see a lot of imagery that has wheat, stalks, like Demeter is considered the goddess associated with Lammas. And she is often associated, you see her carrying a sheath of wheat. And so, like in this, this imagery is an image of Demeter, and she has, all these stalks of wheat around her. In the Pacific Northwest, August 1st, I think our wheat is pretty green still. It's not really in the harvest stage. But there's lots of things that we are harvesting in Lammas. And so again, you can think of, what are you harvesting in your life? What have what has come to fruition and celebrating that, celebrating the things that have realized from the seeds that were planted in Imbolc and in spring equinox. You know, what are you coming to harvest? What are you coming to um, discover about the work that you've put in to create the thing that you've created? Um, the winter time is really so much about rest, you know, in our current uh, industrial growth society, we think that everything should be in a constant state of growth and that the graph should always look like this, right? Everything continues to go up. And that is not how nature works. Nature needs rest. Nature needs sleep. And so this is that kind of coming to the end of the cycle. We're in the harvest portion. Lammas, fall equinox, and Samhain are all harvest holidays. And then we get to winter solstice, which is like sleep, rest, lay down, stop engaging, you know, get quiet, um, reduce your activity, like sleep. That's the kind of energy of winter solstice. So for Lammas, we're looking at white, green, and yellow as colors for an altar. The energy of the season is relaxation, reflection, and casual. You know, it's kind of like we're not quite in the fervor of harvest. We're in the like walking through the garden, picking up a few of these and a few of that, because not everything's popped, but some things are available. So we're starting to enjoy the work in the garden. We're starting to, you know, eat the fruits of our labor. We probably are eating our raspberries and those kinds of things at this point. We're eating the summer squashes that have grown. Um, so the crystals that you might consider for this time would be moss agate, aventurine, cat's eye, and obsidian. The herbs, goldenrod, nasturtium, Queen Anne's lace, sunflower, poppy, rose, vervain, heliotrope, yarrow. There's so many herbs during this time of year. And you can work with those in a variety of ways. You can eat the nasturtiums, you can eat Queen Anne's lace, you can eat sunflowers. You can also use these as decorations. You can certainly use poppies and rose and vervain as decorations. You can harvest heliotrope and yarrow for medicines. You can make them offerings on your altar. You know, all of those kinds of things. You can make tea with yarrow. Yarrow has a very also a mildly sedative element to it. It's very dreamy. Yarrow can help you also move into a trance-like state. Yarrow is a mild nervine. It's also great for colds. It makes your body sweat a little bit, so it makes your body produce some it moves moisture to the outside of your body, so it's great if you feel a cold coming on. Probably not in Lammas though, is when you're going to feel a cold. Some crafts would be making orange candles, which is one of the things that is in the Circle Round Starhawk book, which is basically just when you take the orange peel off of an orange, taking it off in a way that it has two cups, and then there's the center of the orange that can act like a wick. And once that's dry, you can put some wax in and light the wick and turn it into a candle. Preserve your favorite foods. As you see here, there's some jam that we made, some pickles that we processed, and even some dried fruit that we processed as well. We really love to process dried fruit in our house at the end of the season. In particular, this is like an all fall event. We buy 100 pounds of apples and cut them into pieces and dehydrate them. Veggies too. I haven't been as successful at dehydrating veggies because I don't have good recipes to use them in, but I would love to do more of that. We harvest our herbs for our apothecary. You see here hops and rose hips. So those are ready for processing. And we also love to share our harvests with friends and family. So these pickles, I think that year, we haven't made pickles in a few years, but I think that year we made like 60 jars of pickles. I'm kind of an over the top person when it comes to this kind of thing because if I'm going to take the time to pickle some vegetables, I'm going to pickle 40 pounds of vegetables. So if I'm going to get all the stuff out, if I'm going to do the thing, I'm going to do a lot of it in one chunk of time. My grandmother used to pickle pickles every day. So she'd go out into her garden and pull 4 or 5 pickles off the vine and go in the house and make up the brine and pickle 1 jar of pickles. So or 3 if the harvest was big, you know. But I don't do it that way. And partly it's because the rest of my life is really busy, you know. My grandmother was lucky enough to stay home with her family most of the time for most of her adult life. She did work for some of her early adult life, but when she got married, she stopped working. And so she had more time to do preservation that is just not as available to me as a modern lady who has to have a job. So those are some of the things that we love to do around the Lammas holiday. Okay, so we had this is the end of our time together. We're at about 90 minutes, so we're not going to probably go to the full hour if we end up. I mean, if you all have if you have questions, I'm really happy to answer them and stick around and chat for a little while if you have any thoughts. I am doing another event on September 17th, which will be the dark half of the year, and we'll talk about autumn equinox, Samhain, winter solstice, and Imbolc. So those will be the next 4 holidays that we'll spend time with. If you would like to get your name on that list, you're welcome to register for that class now. I do have a couple other classes that I offer too. I offer typically about monthly a free class called Connect with Your Soul Guides. You're welcome to join me there. I'm doing a class about astrology and oh, great. Okay. All right, Adeline, thanks for coming. Nice to see you. All right. So it's just you and me, Michael. I'm so glad you came. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm also going to stop recording so that as you and I have our. So thanks everybody who is watching the recording later. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Moon Hill Mystery School.